Now, I don't know how most people grew up. When I was growing up, I was in a Christian household. My dad worked, my mom stayed home, took care of the kids, the house, and we went to church every Sunday and Wednesday. And I can remember my dad reading me stories out the Bible since the time I was as far back as I can remember. Of course, later on we had a lot more issues, but at that time we sat down at the table every meal. We prayed before every meal, and things were pretty smooth. And that's how people used to do things. Mom stayed home, dad worked, whether it was a farm or a factory or whatever. The mom and dad were both there. And you had two parents involved in raising. And usually, whatever it was, you started working with dad probably about 15 years old. And if he was on a farm, he was a lot younger than that. But everybody prayed together. They worked together, and everybody lived together for generations. It wasn't until around the time of the Industrial Revolution that people in America started changing the way they started doing things. Where when you turned a certain age, you moved out the house. And then in the early 1920s and 1930s, with Edward Bernays pushing the advertisement movement, because before that, most people didn't buy things unless they needed them. With the ability of the assembly line, stuff like that, they had to be able to move more products because they were making more products. So they started advertising things with all the new things that were really coming out, like TV. Well, TV didn't come out really big until like the 50s, but radio and movies started really advertising all these things. Edward Bernays took his Uncle Sigmund Freud's work and used it to pretty much brainwash the entire country into buying all kinds of things they didn't need. Keeping up with the Joneses is what they call it nowadays, still today. And all these nice things you can do to improve your life, you have to have these things. That was when it became popular for you to move out of the house at 18, go to the city, make some big money, become rich and mad powerful. But the most amazing thing to me is there is nothing more gratifying than becoming a father, or a woman, if you're a woman, a mother. And people that grow up in households with two parents usually end up being stable people. I mean, assuming the parents are stable people. I mean, regardless of religious aspects or whatever, I mean, if they're giving you good moral codes, then you're going to be a good moral person. For 99% of the time. I mean, there are certain people like Jeffrey Dahmer that was an absolute madman, came from a good environment. But I mean, there are two factors involved in insanity, and that's environmental or genetic. And his was a genetic issue. There were probably madmen in his family back in the day that were probably great, powerful leaders. I mean, all your great, powerful leaders, all history, were absolute psychopaths, and including to today, except for in America, where we want these people to portray an image that they're not, or they cannot be as good leaders. That's one reason I like Trump, because he was an absolute madman. I mean, regardless of what he says, he's like, this is why I said this why, man, screw you if you don't like it. But he did a lot of great things for the country. I mean, as far as Just nobody liked what he stood, the way he was. And I mean, he may be an ultimate. He may ultimately have an agenda, but regardless of what people think, he did more for the black population than he did than any other president had in probably history. I mean, and he helped out a lot of people. He just didn't like the borders. He didn't want people coming in. I mean, he also told every other country, if you don't like the way I run things, you can kiss my ass. I mean, and that was the way we need a leader that has some balls about him. But regardless, this is what my point is. We need to keep our families together. Every other culture that comes to this country understands this. The Hispanics come to this country, Orientals come to this country. They live 10, 15 people in a house that we normally have 3 people in. Have 3 generations in the house. Have 10 bad, good-looking cars in the yard. Everybody in the house is wearing name brand clothes because they all work. They all chip on the bills, the rent, utilities. Bring mom, dad, whoever else that they have to take care of up here, and send money back home too. I mean, these people know how to live because they know families first. If we all went family first, you wouldn't have to rely on the government for nothing. Because if you had a family member down, you would take care of them. We wouldn't have welfare and all this stuff. This stuff was all set up so you'd have to rely on the government for things, welfare and food stamps and all these different designs. They even pay people to be homeless nowadays. But and then we got these designs of people thinking that they can't ever be anything better because they've trapped in this mind frame that they never have been any better. When the black population has done amazing things all throughout history. And yeah, the Europeans won the war, so history is told by his story. That's what history means, his story. And yes, I'm a Caucasian man. So if you're a Caucasian person, you're probably not going to like the story I tell you because I try to get it from as factual as possible. And this comes from a lot of study. This comes from a lot of work. And I mean, reading the stuff that the people that made these businesses said, Walt Disney, Hugh Hefner, Edward Bernays, Aleister Crowley, the Rockefellers, Rothschilds, the people that are really running the world, understanding what they say, and they really do tell you. If you read enough medical journals and history books from the journals of the historical figures, you'll learn that they told as a bad thing in history. If you read Christopher Columbus's journals, you knew he knew it was America was over here. He came with the ideal of capturing the real Jerusalem, the real Zion, capturing Pastor John, and finding the Fountain of Youth. And if you don't understand that, then you gotta get into the whole Prester John story, which starts in 1165 with a letter they got. And I mean, most people say it's mythological. It's legend. There's a difference between myth and legend. Myth is something that doesn't exist. Legend is something that does exist. They just haven't proved it. And they keep on mixing these words up. Legend. versus myth, and evolved instead of adapted. And it really messes our mind frames up. Just like people saying a diet. A diet is what you're actually supposed to eat every day. It does not mean what you eat to lose weight, but that's what we use it for today. A sale. A sale is anything that you sell to somebody else, property that is sold to another person. But we consider sell as it's cheaper than it normally is. It's misappropriation of words. It's like most people ask women why they think about Andrew Tate. They say he's misogynist. So what does misogynist mean? I, You ask people what they think about Trump. Oh, he's an asshole. He's a liar. What do you lie about? I mean, they don't know. And nobody actually investigates anything. They just go by what everybody else says and thinks that narrative is right. But if you're going to represent something, at least take the time to figure out why you represent it. I had so much respect for some of these people that said, they hated Trump, so they wanted to figure out how to go against Trump advocates. So I started reading up on him. Like, well, damn, I like him. He actually did something. He did something that nobody's done in 30 years. He actually helped our own people. I mean, what do you mean he's racist? It's ain't racist. I mean, if you really investigate things, you find out that the narrative they're pushing isn't right. And this narrative that we should separate our families and be slaves to work forever and you never make it anywhere is not right. The ideal that we should put our relatives in homes and let them die is not right. We should be taking care of our elderly people. I mean, there are times, I understand, that 1, 2 people can't take care of a family, but if the entire family is involved, generally, there's enough people to be able to do it. Generally. Especially if you have productive people in the family, and you're not all on debt, trying to live the American dream. Part of the reason people work until they're 75 years old because they're trying to live the American dream to buy this house that they'll pay off just in time for them to retire and pay off the car, just the last car, just in time for them to retire. And then they're just praying that things start breaking down again because after 30 years of paying on a house, I mean, it's starting to fall apart. That they can afford the repairs and the taxes that you had to pay on something you already own, so they don't take it away from you after you're working your entire life to get it. When if you were living on family property that you have owned for years with 15 people in the family, all there, then or more, depending on how big your family is. And after about 3 generations, you have 30, 40 people most of the time in a household, in an average sized family. On this property that your family's owned forever, if they're taxing you for something that your family's owned forever, which old homesteads don't even have taxes on them. They go under the Homestead Act, where they gave the property away 200 years ago after they stole it from the Indians. But, I mean, if you lived like that, then you wouldn't be out here barely struggling by. You could work 40 hours a week and spend time with the kids and help raise them, and them not being raised by the internet and the TV and whatever crap their teachers teach them. Actually homeschool them and teach them correctly and morally, and so when they get old grown up, they're not incarcerated in prisons and institutions. They are meeting women that are quality people, and instead of running around being gangbangers, they are growing up to be quality people and finding good relationships that don't fall apart in 2 years, and actually be married for 40, 50, 60, 70 years. And it does happen because I've seen people who were married for nearly 70 years. I mean, it's very rare, but I have seen it. And we are so misguided about the way we think because people have put this ideal in our mind that you need to go out and become some great success. And women have liberation, so they need to be great successes. And you can go out and be immoral as possible, and you're still going to go to the kingdom of heaven because you accepted Jesus in your life. And a lot of this is lies. A lot of this is to cut down the population and to incarcerate, to get people immoral enough that they get themselves incarcerated, so you have a good slave population there. And then the ones that aren't incarcerated in jails because of that, they're enslaved to the mind. All these things they need that they never accomplish. Most of them die poor in debt. And their children inherit their debt. I mean, it's an insanity that we've really adopted over the generations. And my parents raised me that you should go out there, you work hard, you move out at 18, and then you try to get something before you retire. And it never seemed to work out. And I mean, I know I've seen people do it. I mean, and most of them are going to be in debt until they die, and most of if they have any desires of keeping the property, like my grandpa has his church, he still owes like $250,000 on the property. If his family, if my cousins don't work everything out right, they'll lose the property within a matter of years, no matter how hard he worked his entire life to keep it. My grandpa was a very intelligent man. He worked very hard to get that property, that church together, and so people can come there and find whatever belief they have. I mean, I don't agree with what he teaches, but I mean, at least he's teaching something. But the point is if we would all work together, then and all live together, then it'd be a bigger community than it is now. We'd probably all still be back in Texas, but I mean, it would be so much bigger than it is now. Now, I mean, I don't think like my family. I'm a free thinker. I go out and study all the time, and I don't just study the history books. I study the journals from the people that did the history. I study the medical the counts from the country on how many people they wiped out when they invaded this country. I mean, and science, history, and religion were my theology, were my main loves. And it always bugged me why you couldn't get them together. And you work on it just right, and you do get them together. But history is so more intense than I think people ever realized. We'll never be able to unravel it in this lifetime, at least in this age, because this age is almost to an end. And I'm kind of rambling at this point. I'm telling you, get your family together. Study theology. Get yourself right. That's the hardest thing. I don't do enough studying on technology. I'm trying to get myself right, trying to help everybody else. If they listen, they're looking for something, learn Hawa is God. Hawa is the name, as in Exodus chapter 3, verse 14, and it says, I am that I am, means Hawa Asher Hawa. Hawa is the name. Hayah. Hawa. Jehovah is a description of the name, of what it is, what they are, not who they are. It says, "Call me Hawa for all your generations." There's no scripture that says anything other than that. I am is in the book 3,500 sometimes as the name. Learn that. Keep your family together. Um, Focus every day. And pray every day. Study every day. Study everything. Vibration, flat earth, multiverse. Don't get confused with all the BS. You cannot travel to other planets. And if they were going to spend money on studying things, they ought to study this planet because they still hadn't. There's still entire continents pretty much they hadn't 5 billion kilometers, 5 million kilometers. They hadn't discovered, hadn't excavated or hadn't uncovered in the Amazon. That's like the size of India, and a third of the ocean. We hadn't another. We don't know nothing more than a third of the ocean. There's tons of stuff down there. There's tons of stuff on this planet we don't know, and not to mention the stuff that is past the South Poles and underneath the Earth. You know there's stuff underneath the Earth because it says in the Bible. Do not make images of anything in the heavens, in the sky, in the sea, upon the earth, or beneath the earth. We know this stuff. You know that the earth is flat because it says so in the Bible. And you know there's a dome over it because it says so in the Bible. The firmament. Study. I mean, you can get so much out of the book. But there's some things that are even messed up in that. And so there's so many books out there to read. I mean, people talk about what happened in World War II, and it was a terrible thing. I mean, I'm not saying that 7 million people dying isn't bad, but the Marxism movement was happening at the same time as World War I and World War II in Russia, which killed 100 million people. Nobody tells you crap about that until communism started coming into effect in the 1950s. And it started affecting us, so we started getting involved in fighting communism for 50 years, something like that, you know? I mean, no, 40 years, but regardless, study, pray, get better, keep your family together. Allah Hawa, and may you be blessed.